So as we take a look at C3, this is our third part of all these writing equations. We keep going back to that point-slope form. But we want to identify now our slope-intercept in our linear functions that are of this form, f of x equals mx plus b. Sometimes you'll see it as y equals mx plus b. We want to always think of it as a function, right? So you might see it, you might have seen this last year when you were looking with your equations, y equals mx plus b. But we're kind of thinking that they are functions. So writing the equation and then being able to write it and rewrite it in other forms. We are going to continue to look for that y-intercept. We're going to always look for our slope as we are graphing. So if we are looking at our vocabulary, it says a blank is a point where the graph of a function intersects the axis. That is called an intercept. And then we have these special intercepts. We call them, when it crosses the y-axis, we call it the y-intercept. That's where it crosses the y-axis. And similarly, the x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis. So as we are looking at our vocabulary, everything on that y-intercept, all of my x-coordinates are going to be 0. Okay? So it says we want to identify our x-intercept and y-intercept for the following graphs. Compare them to the equations for the lines, and what do we notice? So if I'm looking at this point right here, this would be my y-intercept. It's located where? 0, -2. Right? What's my x-intercept? 2, 0. Okay? 2, 0, 0, -2. And it says, if we look at this equation, in simplified form for the points, what point did they use? They used the point over at 2, -2, right? Y equals 1x plus 2. And then it should be negative what? -4. Some typos in there. And this one should be, if we went over at 4, that one is correct, right? So do you agree that they both simplify to be y equals 1x minus 2? Okay. Over on this one, what is my y-intercept? It's located again at 0, 2. And my x-intercept is going to be over here at 6, 0. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so if this is 4, because it's going down, oops, no, we can't see it as easily, can we? It's going to be like a fraction, right?
4.5.
Okay, wait, we're going down 1 and over 3. Down 1 and over 1, 2, oh yeah, 5, 0. Okay. 5, 0.
No, because the 5 is that line. 5 is the end of the graph.
That's it. 5. You guys.
1,
4
2,
is
3.
right after
Right, all right,
Yeah,
all right.
exactly.
6, 0. Because what are we doing? We are going over, down 1 and over 1, 2, 3. 6, 0. Okay? So, we now want to take a look at the equations down here. The simplified form of this equation. What do you notice about the number back here? About our number back here. As the what intercept? As our y-intercept. So when we are looking at those, when we look at the simplified form, what we want to put down is this. When we are looking at our simplified form of the equation, the y-intercept is the same as the number that's being added or subtracted. The y-intercept is always going to be the same as the number added or subtracted to the x term. So this number back here, the 2, the -2, if I was looking down here, that is my -2, that is my 0, 2. So in the simplified form. So a lot of times what I might do is I might ask you to write the equation like you did today, those last ones where you were asked to write it in simplified form. So you did this. But when you originally plotted it, you maybe plotted it with the point -2, -4. And so you plotted this point and then you went up 1 and over 1. If I'm looking at it really quick to see if you did it right, I can see this simplified form and I know it has to go through on the y-axis at -2. And I can look at this simplified form and I can go 2 and I see negative slope down 1 over 3. And I can really quickly look at your graph and see if you have done it correctly. So those are some of the things that I can just quickly take a look and go, oh yeah, they're on track, or they are way off as I'm looking at it. So this next one says, look at the information, predict that the y-intercept will be based on our equation. So, slope was 5, they gave you the point 0,2. 0,2 is the what? That is the y-intercept. So, like, we shouldn't even really be thinking about this one right away because why? They gave it to us right here. Did they give us that nice of a one in problem 2? No. So, we have a slope of 1/4. We had to start with this equation. They distributed, right? 1/4 times x, 1/4 times -12. That was, and you take 1/4 of -12, you should have had, if we were thinking of simplifying this, right? 1/4 x minus 3 plus -6. So that's how they got this new equation. So what should my y-intercept be? 0, -9. Because when I have this equation written, right, this is going to be my y-intercept, okay? This is going to be my y-intercept as I look at that. So it doesn't matter if you go -9 or plus a negative, just make sure you keep the sign. So it says, when we write an equation in point-slope form, then simplify. Now we have another name, it's called our slope-intercept form. So the question, why do you think we call it slope-intercept form? Because the two numbers in the equation, the first one is the slope. That's always with your x. The y-intercept is our second one. So when we look at the slope, slope is always the coefficient. That just means the number that's times x. Coefficient of x. The slope is always going to be the number times x. Okay? So when we are looking at that, that's our number that is being multiplied times x. And the y-intercept is the number that is by itself. Okay, with no variable. And this only works if you have one y equals. And we write it usually this way. 1y equals mx plus b, like we looked at the beginning of the unit. M is the slope, same as we did before finding slope. B is the y-intercept. Form we're asked to identify what's your slope and what's your y-intercept. And a lot of times I'll just have you write the slope as m. So slope-intercept form, often written like where m represents slope and b represents our y-intercept. Remember, b is always going to be added to the x term, so it may be a subtraction. You might need to change it to adding the negative. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to put m is the slope, right? And we can write b is the y-intercept. So m is equal to 3, b is equal to 2. What does the y-intercept look like as an ordered pair? Is it 2, 0 or 0, 2? It's always 0, 2, right? So, take a look at those next two. This next one, you should be able to easily do it. But the last one, you got to do something different, right? This is not in the right form. You do not have y equals. So please get your y equals first. And this is my hint when we did those literal equations. Remember, I always said, put the x term first and then plus the number. Because now we're doing slope-intercept, and it just makes so much more sense if we're writing it down. So the second one, I'm hoping you got 2/3 and y-intercept of -4. 0, -4 is ordered pair. That's the point on the graph that I go to, right? I go no left and right, go down 4, and then from that point I go a slope of 2/3 and I find more points on my line. This one, in order to solve this equation, we needed to add 4 first. We are not adding 2x and 4 together. It is 2x plus 4. So the slope is 2. Could you write it as 2/1 when we go to graphic? By all means. B is our 0.4, or B is equal to 4. So, start off on this next one, and now they give it to you back in our point slope form, right? So what is our slope in the first one if we are taking a look at that? Aiden, what do you have? 3. And the point that we want to use is going to be, what, Maya? So I have slope equals x minus, this is my x1, right? Plus y1. So what would be my point? So my x coordinate is going to be what? 1. And my y coordinate is negative.
It's not negative.
If we are taking a look, 3 is a positive slope, we're getting to the point 1, 2 first. Here's 1, 2. Our slope is 3, up 3 over 1. We're also going to go down 3 and back 1. Right? Positive slope had to go up to the right. I could put more than 1 point. Usually I had to put at least 2 or 3. Then you are going to take, again, I am all in favor of straight edges, like the edge of a protractor, a ruler, edge of your, another piece of paper, and this would be mine. So can I now tell pretty easily my y-intercept if I was looking at this? Yes, I can easily tell my y-intercept. So they just asked us to graph. This one, what is my slope as I am looking at that one? Negative 2/3. Keeping in mind that we are always talking rise and run, and all the negative is telling us is the direction. So this positive 3 told us it went up. This negative out in front tells us my line has to slope down to the right. Remember the base, right? The point that we are looking at should be what, Brooklyn? 0.4. So we're going to go to 0.4 because it's my y-intercept. So whereas here they gave you the ordered pair with the xy, now it's ordered pair 0.4. Negative 2/3. That means I'm going down 2 and over 3. My line is slanted down to the right. Down 2 over 3. I can't really do more than 2 points really nicely on this one. So if I have those 2 points, just make sure you're extending your line and that you put arrows on it, that it is not going to be a segment. Okay? Fee. So $35 an hour plus a startup fee to drive to your house is $65. I think they charge way more than that per hour. But model the linear function using equations and a graph. Use x for the number of hours and y for the cost. So they tell us what x is. X is the number of hours. This is going to be the cost in dollars, right? So label your graph. Some of you lost points on the test because you didn't label your graph. So they are charging $35 an hour and a startup fee of $65. They are giving us the slope. The slope is almost always going to have the per with it. So when you're looking at something like this and they say you're charging $35 per hour, that's like telling us $35 per 1 hour. That is our slope. Okay? A lot of times we just would write it as 35, right? The point is, they charge us a $65 startup fee. That's an ordered pair. That is 0, 65. So if I was going to go graph that, right, that's like here, 0, 65. They don't even come to your house. They're not even there for a half hour. And obviously they can't charge you if they're not there. But when they walk in your house, the startup fee is 65. So now we want to write an equation that we're going to graph. Y equals, do we know the slope? Yeah. 35. Do we know the y-intercept? 55. Y equals 35x plus 65. Some of you on the last test, you told me y was that 50 minus 7. It's not minus 7 every time. It's minus 7. This is 35x. So now, from this point at 65, we need to go for 1 hour. How much are we going to be charging? 35 plus 65 gives us, okay? So we're going to go put our next point, right? So 1 hour, then we're going to go for 2, then we're going to go for 3. So if we are looking at those, does that look about right? Got 100, a little under 150, up to about 250 if we're looking at that. So please make sure you make your graph if you have it. Okay? The last part of your homework tonight that you're going to be doing is this is like a lot of reading and a lot of information. So just so you're aware, we're going to be doing one more form of our equations tomorrow. It's called standard form. So, family of functions is a group of functions with common characteristics. In this unit, we'll be studying family functions known as our linear ones. The common characteristic is that they are all straight lines. The parent function for linear functions is the simplest one. And our simplest function is y equals x. That's called the parent function for the linear one. So anytime I'm looking at a linear equation, the equation that models it is going to have the variables only raised to the first power. So if it's linear in an equation, the x and the y are just going to be to the first power. When I look at the graph for a linear, I'm looking at the ordered pairs, but it should be, when I talk about that graph, a nice straight line, and it includes all the ordered pairs. And when we think about that, it is going to be a really nice straight line. And it just depends as you look at these different lines over here, which way that line is directed. But we are talking about the fractions and decimals all the way along here. We just don't write all those numbers because we want to pick nice numbers. Like we want to pick 2, 2, and 1, 1, and 0, 0. But every point, if I plug in 1/5, I'm going to get a positive 1/5 in that equation, right? So if I put in a number, there's more points on this line. The table, what are we looking for? This is in our table on your test when you were looking for linear. We are looking for those same ordered pairs, but it's always going to be constant, addition or subtraction, adding or subtracting, in the y, right? In our y table of our, in the y coordinate of our table. So it says linear equations can be written in such forms. We have linear vertex form, or we have what's called the point slope form. That's what we've done where I just asked you to write the equation. We now have slope intercept. On the test, or on our quiz next week on Wednesdays, when it looks like that quiz is going to be, I'm going to ask you, if I just say write an equation, this is the simplest one, go with it. If I say it must be in slope intercept, then you got to simplify it. And then we are going to be talking about tomorrow the standard form of equations. But what does that M stand for? M is how you move on your graph. So whenever you're thinking of the M, that's how you move, it's your steepness. The B is where it begins. That's your beginning point or your y-intercept. And HK is just a coordinate on the line. A lot of times we might think of that as our XY, same thing. Okay? So all that vocabulary on